All right, we had a closer look story that we wanted to jump into because you know how much we love talking about Google and all of the weird stuff that they do. Well, their day in court has finally come. And a US judge ruled that Google does not have to sell Chrome, the browser, in this particular antitrust case. But that's about the only thing they won on because Google must end up sharing some of its exclusive deals. And by sharing them, I mean end them. And then they also have to share parts of the search data with rivals across the board. Now, the reason why this is considered a win is because it means that the Department of Justice did not break up Google like everybody was thinking that they might.
Hmm.
It kept the core business intact. They were allowed to keep Chrome, and wouldn't you know it, it boosted Alphabet's stock price. Go figure. I'm shocked. I wanted to dive into this one with you, Ned, because I know that we talk a lot about kind of how Google is basically have a stranglehold on the internet today. Um, a lot of people wanted Google to sell Chrome. I think that that was the wrong remedy for the particular situation. The judge in this case actually did dive into a lot of topics very closely. And I was wondering if maybe you could kind of give us your take on it because I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Yeah, I mean, Google was found guilty of having a monopoly over advertising and search. That was the finding from last year, I think sometime in August of 2024. And so now it was up to what's the remedy? What should we do about that? And a lot of people, including the Department of Justice, were pushing that Google have to divest from Chrome and Chromium and also potentially Android. The judge who was looking over what we should actually do said, while that is a potential remedy, they did not feel that it was necessary and that it would have the intended effect of breaking up Google's monopoly and allowing other entrants into the search. Although search is driven through Chrome and Google does set up Google search engine as the default search engine on Chrome, forcing them to divest from Chrome wouldn't necessarily change that fact. And it would also force a worse user experience on the customers who are using Chrome today. And generally, the yardstick that's been used for monopoly is what is the impact to customers, not the market as a whole. If you're negatively impacting customers by the presence of your monopoly, then something needs to change. But if you have a nice monopoly and your customers are doing great, then the Department of Justice has mostly turned a blind eye to it. And so the finding was stripping them of Chrome, that's not going to do anything in terms of this monopoly. Instead, they went for other remedies like barring them from having exclusive arrangements for search and advertising. Now, that doesn't mean that Google is barred from making payments or offering other consideration to their distribution partners or even preloading the placement of their Google search. They're still able to do all of that. It just can't be exclusive in the contract. It can be exclusive in practice, but it won't be exclusive in the contract. Do I think that this is enough to actually end Google's monopoly on search? Not even close. I don't think anything that they're doing in this decision is actually going to materially hurt Google in the long term because it has extended such a lead in terms of search monopoly. There would have to be a sea change for that to occur. And I'm curious what your thoughts are and what would actually need to happen as a remedy for this situation.
I think the judge realized that the remedy to fix Google searching problems is already happening, and she can't do anything about it, or he can't do anything about it. I forget who the judge in this case was. So I absolutely agree with you. Chrome is not the problem. Chrome is the most visible um, expression of what goes on because we use it all the time. But I see this problem on Firefox, on Safari, on Edge, whatever. The problem is not that Google has control of the browser. The problem is that the browser effectively uses Google services for everything else, right? Gmail, search, web, AI. There's your problem. The way to unseat Google as the king of search is not to break up their monopoly. It's to find a different way to search. Because if you go back in time long enough, Google was not the king of search. I have used Alta Vista. I've used Ask Jeeves. I've used tons of things. what ended up happening is that Google got better than all of them. It was only when Google was in the front that it decided to use that power for their own ends. The only way to break that is to find a different paradigm, a sea change, if you will. And I think that's what AI is, because that's one of the reasons why Google is scared right now. They're seeing dropping ad revenues because people aren't clicking 6 pages deep into a Google search anymore. They're not even clicking on it. They're going to that box and typing in their question, and AI is returning the result at the top. So nobody sees these ads. Nobody sees this product placement. And the judge said, well, I'm not going to slap your hands for paying $20 billion to be the default search engine for an iPhone. What I'm going to say is that that can only be the case if you continue to pay. There has to be a way for other people to be a part of that. And I'm going to try to level the playing field. This goes back to a story we talked about. It was either last week or the week before, where a certain um, uh, rocket ship maker and electric car manufacturer was very mad that his competitor AI platform was the one that was the default in iOS. And my response was, well, then why aren't you paying to be on the list? That's basically what they're saying, is you can be on the list if you're willing to pay. And if you remember from my rant from back then, my rant was Internet Explorer in and of itself was a really crappy browser. It just so happened it was on the desktop in Windows 98. That's why it became the dominant browser. When you had to go out and download Netscape Navigator by using Internet Explorer to find it, it kind of became a no-brainer. One of the reasons why I still use Safari on my Mac is because it's included in the operating system. Yeah, I use Chrome for a lot of other things too, but I am a person who's going to switch back and forth to use what I need. Most people don't. They pick one and they go with it. When I install my mother-in-law's computer for the 45th time, I'm going to put Chrome on it because it's what she's familiar with. Google is not the enemy. What Google did to the services on the back end is the problem. And like you said, monopolies are only useful if they benefit society. Google monopolizing ads, you can argue it didn't really benefit society, but you can't break that up legally. The legal remedy just means they're going to find a way to transform what they're doing. And then the two pieces are going to become competing companies that are just going to get bought again later. Don't believe me? How many phone companies do we have in the US right now? How many phone companies did we have in the US in 1982? All of the baby bells are reassembling to become Bell Voltron again. And Ma Bell is getting back together sooner or later, because that's how all of these things work. That is how capitalism works. We reward the people who find the best way to make the most money. And Google did. And now everybody's mad because they don't have $20 billion to pay Apple or Google to be the top search engine result. So I don't know how we're going to fix this, but I also don't know that it needs to be fixed, because the paradigm shift is happening as we speak. And I think AI is the way that whole thing is going to be broken up.
I think the problem with the monopoly was they didn't really address the core issue, is the fact that Google owns both sides of the ad business. There's the selling ads to those who want to present them, and then there's the presentation of ads. The the auction that happens every time a page loads that has Google ads on it. Those are two separate products, two separate offerings. They used to be separate companies that Google bought and brought in-house. And then they were able to set up this agreement between the two businesses, basically locking everybody in and punishing those who tried to go outside of their walled garden. I think the Department of Justice could have forced Google to break up those two portions of the business and saying these two portions now just need to spin off and become their own distinct organizations, kind of like breaking up Ma Bell into the Baby Bells. It would have been extremely disruptive. And the court basically said breaking up or hurting Google might harm customers. And since the court cannot predict the future, it is opposed to making these sweeping changes that would disrupt the market. The market, which is still currently a monopoly. So if you think monopolies are bad, then the court didn't go far enough because it failed to break up the monopoly. If your perspective is, are customers going to be more hurt by this disruption in the short term? I say probably. Would there be a bigger benefit in the long term? I can't say for sure, but I generally don't think monopolies are good for capitalism, the free market, or for customer experiences over the longer tail of a particular service. Fortunately, I think you're right. Slowly, we're going to see search replaced by Gen AI once it gets at least a little bit better. And the way that they choose to serve up ads is going to have to change along with it. Right now, ChatGPT doesn't serve me up ads. They will find a way to monetize it, but right now it does not. And I'm one of those weirdos who pays to Coggy for my searching. So I'm actually paying for a search product anyway. So I don't see the Google ads as much, but I think, yeah, Google's going to have to fundamentally shift the way that they make money within the next 10 to 15 years. But it's going to be a slow shift as the new generation comes into its own and adopts these other ways of searching the internet for whatever it needs.
I think we're going to be talking about this story for a few more months to come because we haven't heard the end of this.